Now, climate change presents many different challenges, and this depending on the sector we're looking at, right? And some of the risks are already manifesting, with businesses being impacted across operations, across their supply chains and markets as well. But there's also the potential for new revenue to consider. This as a result of the growing demand for low emissions products and services, as well as the potential for better competitive advantage with shifting consumer preferences and sustainable financing. Our second panel today is going to be putting the spotlight on the risks, but also the opportunities for innovations, investments, and positive social change at the end of the day. I'd like to, at this point, introduce Dr. Mo Ibrahim. He's founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation to frame things ahead of our next panel discussion.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by offer my thanks and gratitude for both Standard Bank and SAWAS of London for holding this conference. It's really important to start this conversation about climate as we are going through the countdown of the COP27 in Africa. It's a great opportunity for us to have this conference in Africa because we need to talk. We need our voice to be heard. African voice has been absent from the discussion on climate, unfortunately. And our friends on the global north have been really talking and consuming all the oxygen in the room. Let me start by stating some facts. Africa suffered a lot from changes in climate. Our farmers, our herders, we had conflicts in our communities as herders moved south, seeking feed for their animals and then clashing with the farmers. And we had a lot of issues. We estimate that 40 million people will forced to migrate in the next 20 years. Is a major problem for us. And the funny thing about this climate change is that it's something global. The polluters on the north don't suffer as much of the pollution as the guys in the south who did nothing to really instigate this deterioration really in our climate. The average African citizen carbon footprint is 2%, just 2% of the average footprint of our counterparts in the north. We did not put this carbon or this stuff up there, yet we are really taking the brunt of the change in the climate. It is a problem. Many African countries have low level of resilience, which is needed for adaptation and mitigation, unfortunately. And the polluters who have the moral responsibility and legal responsibility really to help with adaptation and mitigation are dragging their feet. The $100 billion offered by the rich countries never materialized. And this is a really unfortunate state of affairs. Let us talk also about our situation in Africa. I mean, some facts, not many people know them. In Africa, we have 22 countries where the main source of their power is coming from renewable. No other continent in the world has that percentage of countries developing renewable. 22 countries, whether it is geothermal, whether it is hydro, whether it's solar or whatever. So we are doing really a lot of our our bet here. Africa also has a major sink of carbon. One important sink really is the Congo basin. The Congo basin sinks 4% of the annual carbon emission. That is more than African annual contribution, which is about 3.3%. So Africa is a net sinker of carbon, really, not emitter of carbon. Yet, we are not rewarded for that. This is a major problem there. And all come down to the fact that the polluters sort of dragging their feet, sometimes in denial of their responsibility. We have people in North America, US and Canada, emitting over 16 tons per person a year. The average in Africa, many of our countries pollute less than 0.2%, less than 1%, 0.2%. Sorry, 0.2 tons of carbon. It is amazing ratio. And unless we introduce a global binding carbon price, this problem will not be solved. We all believe in the power of markets. We all talk about markets. Yet, when it comes to emission, somehow we drag our feet. This problem can only be solved if we have a compulsory pricing for carbon. You pollute, you pay. You sink, you get paid. That is the only way to produce an active market there. And that's something we need to push for. The question of future of energy requirements in Africa and the issue of fighting climate change, these two are linked. And you need to be aware of this, because 600 million people in Africa don't have access to electricity. If you don't have access to electricity, you don't have a life. There's no business, hospitals, schools. How can you live without electricity? 600, that's half of our population. They need power. Yes, we'll put as much solar as possible, but we also need gas. And Africa is a major producer of gas. We have 450 trillion cubic feet of gas in our reserves. At the moment, half of our gas actually goes to Europe. Yet, some well-meaning people in Glasgow last year decided that we should stop funding any fossil projects overseas, which is essentially Africa. That's double standard, that's hypocrisy, when half of our gas actually goes to Europe. It doesn't make sense. Our people need also to use gas as a transition. Gas declared as an acceptable transition in Europe, US, everywhere, but not for Africa. And you just take our gas and tell us, sorry, you can't use it. This is ridiculous and need to be changed. So we have all these issues in front of us. But however, we need to look also at the opportunities for Africa now. Africa has 40% of the global potential of solar energy, 40%. Yet Africa has only 1% of the installations, only 1%. There is a huge headroom there. This is an area which really crying for investment, and not only for us, but also to supply electricity for people in the north who need more power, unfortunately. So that's a really a great potential for us. We need to look at the green economy as really an opportunity for us, and we need to do our bit there. But as I said, Africa already doing a lot. A lot of our countries are really relying on renewable, and that is moving further. Things happening in North Africa. We have the largest solar project in the world developed in Morocco, which is really wonderful. The African Development Bank also have an interesting project in the Sahel using solar to provide power for 90 million people who don't have electricity. So we are working. Namibia is developing a major green hydrogen project, produce 300,000 tons by 2026 to replace coal. That is wonderful. Good luck and thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that Dr. Mo Ibrahim, who's founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, really highlighting that, yes, we are suffering the brunt of climate change despite our small carbon footprint, but we still cannot afford to stand still, right? Especially if we boast something like 40% of the world's solar potential. I'd like to, on that basis, call upon now Dr. Penny Byrne. She's ESG investment analyst at SBG Securities, and her panel of guests to more fully interrogate both the opportunities and the risks that present themselves in the current scenario.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join this discussion today. And here we'll be talking about the potential risks as well as the potential opportunities that arise in our changing climates. Climate change presents significant risks, particularly over the African continent, but it also presents several opportunities for innovation, in particular in the renewable energy space, in facilitating sustainable finance investments, and partnering across society to achieve positive social change. These are just some of the themes that we hope to discuss on today's panel. I'd like to welcome our panelists today. And I was expecting a virtual panelist as well, who is not joining us right now. Oh, there we go. Wonderful. Sorry, apologies for my confusion. There she is. Thank you so much for joining us online. So I will start with Famida Smith. She's a chemical engineer who's been in the platinum group metals mining industry for 25 years. She leads Anglo American's market development work on global hydrogen economy development, where she works closely with the South African government as well as local and international industry players. Judith Odhiambo joins us virtually today. She is the Group Head of Corporate and Regulatory Affairs at Kenya Commercial Bank and has a wide range of expertise, including crisis management, market entry, restructuring, sustainability, and regulatory affairs. Judith is passionate about corporate governance and champions the Women's Diversity Program. On to Berenice Francis. She is the Motus Group Executive responsible for sustainability. She has experience in both public and private sector risk management and is actively involved in professional development. She has held the position of President of the Institute of Risk Management and Vice President and Regional Governor of the Institute of Internal Auditors in South Africa. And last but not least, Jan Fourie heads up Scatec.
Potato.
Sorry. Suddenly not sure of my pronunciation. In Sub-Saharan Africa, it is a leading global and domestic multi-technology and renewable energy solutions provider. Say that 5 times fast. That is accelerating access to reliable and affordable clean energy in high-growth markets. He began his career as an engineer working in energy and industrial projects. After completing his MBA, Jan joined Scatec in 2015, leading business development activities in South Africa, and in 2016 assumed responsibility for all business activities in the region. A warm welcome to all of you. So to kick off, we're going to start with the risk side of this conversation, and I'm going to ask all the panelists to answer this question to begin with. What is your number one climate risk that you are concerned about going forward in the next kind of 5 years or so? And if you can't pick just one, I'll take a top 3.
Would you like me to start?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think what really keeps me up at night is physical risk, so anything around natural disasters. We don't need to really look far. The flood disaster in KZN is a point in case, and that has really exposed our most vulnerable even further. So I believe as an individual, we have a role to play in ensuring that we have positive climate change impact. But as an organization, we as Anglo-American are incredibly committed to ensuring that we have positive climate change and that we don't impact negatively on the environment. And to this end, we have set ourselves ambitious targets to be carbon neutral across all our operations by 2040.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. I think to just take a step back, it's about what is a risk. And often we talk about the fact that it seems adverse. So it really is about the uncertainty in trying to meet your objectives. And for me, around risks and opportunities, about are you in the position to actually take advantage of the uncertainties that are being faced? And so it ties back to why I think our biggest risk is around the ability to invest, to adapt, versus transitioning. Because as organizations, what we're doing is looking at investing in both transitioning, but also dealing with what you speak about, the physical risks, the actual adaptation. How do we look at our footprint differently? Where are we positioned? What is the impact on our operations, say in Australia, where we're having floods, in Africa, where we're having droughts? And how do we ensure that our footprint remains relevant and is resilient? And I think resilience is one of the things that has been eroded over the last couple of years, where we're trying to allocate capital to the right things. So our ability to respond to all these risks that we're seeing is being eroded as we try and transition. And so how quickly we transition is a huge risk for me. And then how do we transition collectively? Because what I'm also finding is that because you have resources to adapt, to respond, you're not necessarily allowing more inclusive responses. So what you're finding is organizations and communities that can afford to respond better are moving, but we're possibly leaving our broader communities behind and creating inequality. So I think it's the inequality that's growing, and then our ability to respond faster, because we know what the risks are. I think what's lagging is making an impact faster.
And as you say, also the uncertainty about exactly when and where all of these things occur.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jan?
Yeah, thank you, Penny. I think as been mentioned by Bernice as well, if you know about risks, you can plan some mitigations towards those. I think the problem that we face with climate change is the fact that you can't plan for these things necessarily. And that poses a risk for a number of things, including the infrastructure. So our company, we build, own, and operate renewable energy facilities around the world, and like big natural disasters can have detrimental effects on whether it's a solar farm, a wind farm, or the hydrology of the hydro facilities that we operate. And being a Capetonian, I'll be amiss to say that water is not a big one. I'm still struggling to get my kids to flush the toilet after the droughts have kind of come and gone, but I mean, it's left a lasting impact on me and my family, and I'm saying it half jokingly, but the impact on agriculture in Africa, hydrology on our facilities, but just food security in general, I think is a big risk, and often our facilities are located out in rural areas where you see the most vulnerable communities really suffering and not having the ability to be resilient because they don't have the resources to do so. So those are some of the risks that we're seeing firsthand.
Absolutely. And Judith, your response?
Greetings, everyone. So for me, I look at it as risk, both physical and transition. So when I look at the physical risk, what I would say is that because our businesses basically rely heavily on the natural systems to prosper, looking at agriculture, what other colleagues have said, our agri-value chain in manufacturing, tourism, all these are actually sectors that support generally the economy of the country. So when these are affected, and even at the moment as a country we are going through a drought situation, we just find that, of course, our people are also suffering due to heavy climate instability. So we have witnessed this, of course, over the past 1 year. And so physical risk, yes, that's a big thing, because what happens is that because of missed weather pattern occurrences, unreliable weather, the way our farmers would plan in terms of farming to make sure that then we have enough food for our people. It means then you have high cost of products, high food insecurities, you have drop in tourism income, and so holistically you find that then the economy has been affected. Transition risk, again, is also another one, so which has highly affected us, looking at both the regulatory and also the policy risk. So we are witnessing a lot of changes in that, but one thing we are also a bit positive about it is that it favors clean production and low technologies, especially for large public and private sector. So we are hoping that even as we transition into low carbon technologies and clean production, we shall be able to see much better incorporation of low carbon pathways. So as a bank, of course, we have committed to being carbon neutral by 2050. And so what we are looking at currently is to see how can we be able to take advantage of net metering for renewable energy, looking at our review of power purchase agreements for thermal power plants that are in the country, and then how also do we work with the different regulators to make sure that we continue to incorporate low carbon technologies in most of our businesses, both the private sector and also the public sector. So transition risk and physical risk are a key component, which I would look at as the most risk that we are dealing with in the short term. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. So now that we seem to have a slightly firmer grip on the risks, at least the main risks, I was quite pleased to see physical risk quite high up on those lists there. We can move on to the opportunities. So what opportunities do we see in this space going forward? Which industry or country or sector is best positioned? And I'll take the same order as last time, so we'll start with you, Famida.
Yeah, so I guess it's no surprise I'm going to say hydrogen and the green hydrogen economy is an opportunity area. And the sector that I see green hydrogen playing a key role in is within heavy-duty transport, particularly mining vehicles. So if I can just give you a little bit of background around what this means. In terms of CO2 emissions, 80%, 80, of all our CO2 emissions on site is directly related to diesel. So these mining vehicles that we drive, one vehicle uses approximately 900,000 liters of diesel per year. So from a decarbonization perspective, finding technologies, suitable technologies that can decarbonize these heavy-duty fleet trucks are quite important to us. And that's the reason why we've invested and developed the world's first of its kind hydrogen haul truck for mining, a 510-ton hydrogen haul truck. So that's where I see an opportunity from a sector base. In terms of a country perspective, based on our solar and our wind potential, there is potential for us as South Africa to generate green hydrogen. And that green hydrogen can be used for two purposes. The first one is for export, and with the war in Ukraine and the need for Europe to actually look at Africa as a supplier of green hydrogen, we are going to see demand for African green hydrogen. So I definitely see potential for us as a country to participate within that. But on a local perspective, or from a domestic hydrogen production perspective, I'd like to draw your attention to the work that we've completed together with our partners, the Department of Science and Innovation, Bambili Energy and ANGI, in terms of the first hydrogen valley for the country. And that really highlights the potential that hydrogen can play within a South African context. Now, based on the qualitative and quantitative analysis that was done in this study, there is potential to generate just under $4 billion in GDP for the country, $900 million in Texas, and a minimum of 14,000 jobs per annum by 2050. In addition to that, there's potential to generate 1 to 2% additional PGM demand from just this particular valley. The valley extends 837 kilometers and spans 3 continents, basically between Limpopo, Gauteng, and KwaZulu-Natal. The great thing about a valley is it's easily replicatable. So you can take the same exact concept where you have the co-location of production and utilization and roll it out in a different region with very similar results. So this gives you an idea of the potential opportunity that green hydrogen can have for us as a country. Thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I think from a opportunities perspective, as any business, you've got to take a look and see what's your current context. So, we mentioned physical risks, etc. So what we've always looked at is what is the leverage we have with our physical footprint? So the opportunity to actually reduce our own impact with regards to emissions, etc., and saying, how do we currently leverage the footprint we have? So obviously moving to renewable, so we're actually less carbon intensive in how we generate revenue. I think that's the first opportunity. How do you become more efficient? So we, for example, have over, say, 550 sites. At the moment, we've been transitioning to saying, how do we move to renewables? And now with legislative changes, we're saying, well, how do we also invest that we can either actually generate excess energy? I think there's that one. The thing around looking at omnichannel, so new ways of work, is how do you create the same service to your customers and same experience to your customers using physical and digital. So I think that's an opportunity that most businesses will look at. And then more importantly is as a huge, play in the mobility space, how do we ensure that we give customers choice with regards to the type of product that's available in South Africa? So looking at what the EV space is, so all automotive manufacturers, as you know, have a very clear vision with regards to their 2030, 2035 net zero carbon emission strategies. So how do we look at what products available, what choices consumers have, and how do we make it easier for consumers to make those choices so that it isn't just a push? Because I think what we've been seeing from a context perspective is that legislation is definitely pushing us towards a less carbon intensive economy, but how do we also make it attractive consumers to make an easier decision? And how do we ensure that there's the right product that's available and that consumers can actually ensure that they make the right choices? So I think there's opportunities in different aspects of your broader value chain, how you deliver your product and then how you actually restate or reset your operations in the context that we have.
Great, thank you.
Great. So I'm an energy guy, so I'm going to speak. My answers will be in that line. But having worked in energy for a number of years, I must say it's probably the most exciting time to work in energy since I've started my career. The way that one regulation in South Africa is busy changing and adapting, but then also, I mean, we're in a global mega trend that's just accelerating and doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. So we're a Norwegian-listed business, but at the moment we actually see the most opportunity within Africa, and that includes not just South Africa, but it includes the sub-Saharan Africa, for which I'm responsible, but Northern Africa as well. And we can touch on some of the green hydrogen opportunities that we're working on, because we do believe that that's the way of the future, especially for the hard-to-abate industries. But in South Africa, I think we sometimes underestimate the value of having a country where you've got a functioning cadastral system. functioning private land ownership. And it might sound a little bit trivial in light of doing energy projects, but if you develop projects from the ground up, there's a lot of institutional things that need to be in place to actually put a transaction together. And I think that's where developers, banks, DFIs can play an increasingly important role to build capacity within countries, because we had Steve Barnes from Standard Bank commenting earlier on that at the moment the money is not the problem, it's finding bankable projects. And that's our realization and lived experience as well. So how do you capacitate developers, but also get countries in a state where they are able to put bankable projects and have investable projects on the ground. So I think that's incredibly important. But that also presents a massive opportunity in terms of upskilling people, professionals, technical, financial, legal, and everything else, because you need all of this to work together. These projects don't happen in a vacuum. You need to take communities along, and it's not a once-off, yes, we've consulted you type of relationship. It's a 20-plus year relationship and partnership that you need to form with the people that's sitting on your doorstep, looking at employment opportunities, upliftment opportunities, and the like. But the added benefit of where we find ourselves is now we're in a position to electrify a big portion of Africa that's previously been, in a way, almost too expensive to do so. I mean, to give you an example, we're busy with a project in northern Cameroon where the northern and the southern grids are not connected, and that was previously run completely off diesel. Now, by adding a couple of megawatts and a couple of batteries there, the economic impact on that region and that community there is vastly increased, and energy security and access to energy has increased. So on the one side, we build large utility scale projects in a place like South Africa where we've got coal-fired power stations that's coming out of commission. Hopefully the economy grows, and it's not just to replace existing generation, but how do we build increasing capacity? And we've got a bit of a blank canvas now to say, well, this old system is kind of defunct. We need to keep it together until we can get new sources on board. But how do we do that? And we're quite excited about this big battery storage and solar project that we're building in the Northern Cape. I mean, it's about $1 billion, and Standard Bank helped a bit. They're not paying me to say this. But it shows you what can be done if people work together in a constructive manner to get things done. So the opportunity is absolutely massive if you've got the guts and the risk appetite to grab it with both arms.
Absolutely. And Judith?
Yes, so what I'd like to add is that in our African experience and what we have seen so far, especially also in Kenya, is that we have seen considerable growth in reliable solar energy, although we still have a larger population that still uses fossil fuel-based energy in homes, and which threatens, of course, health outcomes of our children, the youth, and the elderly. So there's a big opportunity there to drive a reliable solar energy, especially for home utilization. Our agricultural systems also are not adaptive and smart, so we have a manufacturing sector which is characterized by high inefficiencies due to technological and also financial gap. So these are also opportunities that we have seen of how then can we be able to fast track, especially our manufacturing sector, to be able to adopt a smart type of agriculture so that we can be able to produce more. And then the other areas that you have also seen, which are good opportunities, is agriculture, agriculture-related services, energy, manufacturing, which have presented high opportunities for which we can leverage climate risk so that then we can be able to get traction in terms of having even lessons and areas that we can learn of how we can tap into these opportunities. So yes, I know we discuss a lot about risks, but also we take advantage of the opportunities so that then we can be able to create bankable projects that we can be able to work with communities and also with our customers and clients so that they can have a wide range of choices to make when they decide to mitigate or to adapt any of the solutions that are available for them. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks. So lots of opportunities from renewable energy all the way through to climate smart agriculture. There certainly are plenty of opportunities in this story. So one of the other questions is, in the just energy transition, it's presenting a lot of challenges across all sectors, and how are these sectors proactively becoming more resilient? Famida.
Sure. So as the mining company, we have a crucial role to play in terms of our minerals and metals that are needed within the green energy transition. As an organization, we are incredibly supportive of the country-level IRP, our National Development Plan, as well as the Hydrogen Society Roadmap. Our purpose is to reimagine mining to improve people's lives. In order to deliver on that purpose, we fully understand that we need to change our footprint. And in order to do that, we needed to take a multifaceted approach to decarbonization. So that's how we build resilience in terms of our energy security. So we look at 5 things. The first one is renewable energy focused on solar and wind. The second is hydrogen. The third is energy storage, and that's really focused on pumped hydro storage. The fourth is around improving efficiencies. So you take your current operations and you improve your energy efficiency and utilization within these operations. The fifth area is around carbon credits, because we understand that not all sectors are going to get to that point of decarbonization. They are going to be hard to abate sectors. And we actively invest in carbon sequestration projects and technologies so that we can help with an energy transition. Now, with regard to talking around resilience as well as a just energy transition, I'm going to use hydrogen as an example. So it's not the only thing we do, it's just the methodology that we use, and we implement this across all our areas that we consider. Now, one of the earlier speakers mentioned that PGMs are at risk when it comes to battery electric vehicles. So how do we build resilience when it comes to PGM demand as a mining sector? And through our market development work, we actively look at new avenues, and hydrogen is one of these avenues where we look at building resilience. Now, across the hydrogen value chain, we understand that our platinum group metals play a strategic role all the way from hydrogen production to hydrogen storage, as well as hydrogen end use. And we've been actively involved in the space for the better part of 15 years. And our approach has been to take an ecosystem approach. So we don't just look at one area, we consider the entire value chain. So we invest directly into new businesses and ventures, as well as potential R&D to be able to develop that hydrogen value chain. In addition to that, we identify areas where there are pain points, and through our investment in, for example, AP Ventures, which is a PGM venture fund, we focus on how do we get this money to ensure growth capital and growth within that sector. And very importantly, the third area that we look at is around commercial collaborations, because in order for the sector to be sustainable, there has to be sustainable demand. And the way we go about doing that is through aggregation of demand, and that is through these commercial collaborations that we have. The Hydrogen Valley, the Hydrogen Freight Corridor are examples of these types of collaborations. And all of this is underpinned by policy advocacy, having active participation globally as well as locally within hydrogen policy frameworks, as well as communication. So communicating the right message about hydrogen into the market. And we then take this holistic approach. We don't really stop there. What we try to do together with our partners is to look at how do we then build resilient supply chains around what it is we want to do. How do we build the necessary skills that is needed to allow for sustainability of this particular sector? And how do you then ensure that you have enabling policies and frameworks that will allow for large-scale uptake? And once again, I draw your attention to the Hydrogen Valley in terms of all the work that we do. So really taking this holistic approach creates jobs, helps us to be able to build or bring in opportunities for new businesses within the country.
That's fantastic. It's all very good news.
Look, I think, and touching base on what Fakmina spoke about supply chain. So within the transport and logistics, as well as the automotive sector, I think what's important is that you can't have a resilient business if you're not aligned to broader stakeholder needs, as well as connectedness. So what we did learn over the last 2 years is around you can't build resilience if you haven't built the right relationships, trust with your broader stakeholders to ensure that you meet them where they are. So things around, we always have the discussion around mass transport. So in South Africa, the reality is the infrastructure networks that we have, unfortunately, has moved most people away from, say, mass transport, which is essentially what you need to have an internodal transport system. So, for example, railways, bus, etc. The majority of South Africans use mass transport to actually get to anywhere they need to be, for example. The automotive industry, and I think it's something that was mentioned earlier, is that you've got to look at the investment in the past and what they contribute to the broader economy in South Africa or the economies in Africa. And what you've got to do is you've got to work with the different industries to say, well, how do we build on that investment and how do you build on that capacity and skills, because fundamentally you are a huge contributor, not just from a skills perspective, but also from a growth perspective. So building resilience is about saying, well, the investment in EVs specifically, and I know that, when it talks about hydrogen, but the likelihood is that the automotive industry has kind of they've backed EVs as a general view. It was interesting to see the minister's view with regards to the 8.5 billion and the view of EVs. And I think it's because you want to grow a domestic demand. For any export market, you need some level of domestic demand to actually underpin that. Where South Africa is at the moment is and I know that it's a growing market, but we were 0.2% of the actual new car sales, for example, was in what we call NEVs, whether it's hybrid or electric vehicles. So we need to stimulate some demand and supply of EVs, and by growing the local production facilities. So I think being resilient around the fact that internal combustion engines, or ICE, is definitely on the way out. If you're in the automotive sector or in the transport sector and you're not considering new energy vehicles, you aren't going to be around for a very long time, and you'll essentially be destroying the value that's been created and the investment that's been created over the years. So being resilient is about ensuring that you're matching broader stakeholders, and you can only also do that with collaboration. So looking at what funders are willing to, what capital investors are willing to invest in, ensuring that you can transition in a responsible manner, and then ensure that you also then provide choice, so that we're not just sitting with one aspect of how transport is defined. And I think that's important.
Very important, yes.
Yeah, I think as one of the earlier panelists mentioned, there's the just energy transition means different things to different people. So I think the definition is fairly wide. But I mean, if we stay with supply chain for a moment, I think there's something to be said in this transition to consider how we go about linking value chains, because I think there's been a lot of siloed thinking in terms of let's localize X, Y, and Z, and then it's some sort of a policy decision that's been made that does not necessarily make sense. And how do we go about linking value chains to say, well, what's the linkages between our automotive sector, for example, who needs to pivot to EVs, and stationary energy storage that we use in renewable energy? Are there some synergies there that we can exploit as a country and as a continent, seeing that there's a lot of minerals that needs to be mined, that needs to be beneficiated, that needs to go into storage. And having that kind of ecosystem thinking also at a governmental level, and not just trying to score cheap points with some easy implementation that doesn't really move the needle in a big way. So that's the first one. One of the things that we're doing is we're funding research at one of the universities, for example, to make sure that we don't only upskill people for our own business, but there's a just element that we upskill the industry at large. And that happens at all levels, having interns working on sites, having interns working at our offices and different places. So for me, the just transition means a lot of things, so that you don't just think about yourself as a corporate and what returns you can gain from this transition, but how do you actually go about creating an ecosystem that's beneficial for everyone that's part of this ecosystem? Because if we need to get beyond call it the short-termism, I think, in a lot of the thinking. Because if we're going to successfully transition and take the whole continent along, we do need to think long-term investment. And as the opening statement said, if we want to go fast, then we can let vibe, but otherwise it's going to take a bit of time to take everyone with us. No.
Absolutely, and collaboration is so important. And Judith, your thoughts?
So for East Africa, what we have seen is that in terms of our thermal power plants, there's been an intention just to make sure that we are able to have renewable energy that are favored as opposed to thermal power plants. So this has helped us to move in the right direction. Of course, more needs to be done, but the fact that we have already seen the transitioning into renewables is a good step, because you can already see there are some regulatory changes being made to make sure that the whole economy transition into renewables. Secondly is the transport sector, where also we have seen there's a lot of embracing of e-mobility, which is becoming very strong, both for our motorcycles and also normal vehicles and buses. So what we are hoping is that with also proper regulations in place, and we should be also able to see a bit more of traction in this space. So transport sector has also picked this up, and there's a lot of pilot projects ongoing where most of the companies are already testing this just to see how it is moving with their normal automobiles. And with time, of course, we expect the adoption will be done. And as the earlier panelists had said, I think we need to look at it long term, because when you look at it short term, then of course you not see the gains. So we need to look at it also long term and also plan on that same direction. Then the other part is on building and construction. So building and construction, we've seen there's a lot of push also on adoption of green buildings, green codes, efficiencies in the building and construction of materials. So this has also been adopted well, and we have seen it also being adopted across sectors, across country, and even across East Africa. So this is one of the areas where we are going to see a bit of quick wins, even as we adopt that. The other place is also a financing of low carbon interventions, especially during this period of transition. This is very important just to make sure that we are able to achieve an all-round success. So when we look at our ambition of being carbon neutral by 2050, because currently as a bank we are at 13%, just looking to 25% by 2025. So we have identified these areas of renewables, transport sector, on e-mobility, and also construction as being areas that are quick wins for us to be able to transition into carbon neutral by 2050.
Oh, that's great news. And I see we're almost at the question and answer portion of our discussion. So if there are any questions in the room, that would be fantastic. And the microphones will come to you. I'm not seeing any at the moment, so I can ask one or two more of my questions. In particular, we haven't really touched on sustainable finance within Africa and access to it, and where we're seeing financing opportunities. So should I change the order up this time a little bit, just to throw a spanner in the works here? Can we start with you?
So look, I think it's about the discussion regarding access to finance. So we've gone through two sets of loan funding and facilities, one of which was with Standard Bank. Our latest one was with Standard Bank. And I think what you're finding is that from an organization perspective, in terms of, if you align in terms of creating an organization that's fundamentally sustainable in terms of long term, I do think that all financing should have an element of, are you delivering on promises? Are you delivering on creating more with less, so to speak? Are you really looking seriously at what type of carbon intensive businesses and processes you have? So both of the funding that we've had in the recent past has had an element of sustainability linked to it. So where we actually incentivizing organizations beyond just, so it's not specific finance for renewables, but it's financing to grow your business. But there's an element of where you get incentivized if you meet your specific KPIs, if you meet your specific promises, and you deliver on the promises that you're making to broader stakeholders. And I think that type of financing is the norm. And I would expect most organizations to be tapping into that. I think there's also the opportunity around how you blend your investment decision. So your own capital as an organization, in terms of how you are going to look at whatever investment decision, whether it's expansion or renewal, you've got to bring in an element of how you are going to ensure that your lot that delivers ultimately to your low carbon strategy. So whether you do expansions, for example, your footprint expansion, what type of construction material are you using? What type of renewables are you bringing into that building so that you can actually ensure that it delivers to the promises that you're making? So that we're not just saying that we've got a commitment towards sustainable practices, but that we're actually measuring it, that it's being incentivized, and that there's what I would always say, there's a dual reason for why we do what we do. On the one hand, I think what you've got to deliver on is having a more sustainable business, and then you're also getting incentivized by your capital markets to deliver on those promises. And I think there's a genuine appetite for that, and I think many organizations can deliver on that. So it's a different way of looking at things.
That is a slightly different way of looking at things. That's great, thank you. And Judith, what are you seeing in the sustainable finance space?
So what I would say is that generally there's a good awareness among the public and also the organization with our employees. Of course, there's still a lot of capacity building also to be done, which you can't do a one-off. So it is something also that has to be done continuously, so that also employees can see the opportunities to be able even to guide our customers when they're having those conversations on which are the areas where they can take advantage to be able to tap into that space of picking out whether it's renewable energy or retrofittings that need to be done, or embracing a new technology that will be able then to manage efficiencies in terms of energy, in terms of electricity and all that component. So yes, the KPIs are there. We also ensure that, of course, the sustainable finance is also driven, of course, from the top, just to make sure that it's embraced across the organization and everybody plays a role in it. But of course, there's also the component that there's a regulatory framework also to be done. So it's just working to make sure that where there's intention and ambition, that is outlined. We have clear targets of what needs to be done. We also outline what can be done in terms of the short term, the medium term and long term, just to ensure that we are able to cover everything within the scope that is required. So I think even as we work together with our stakeholders, together with our customers, together with the wider stakeholders and also the regulator, we should be able to make a sustainable finance not just something now that looks like an initiative, but that now it's something that is part of day-to-day business for everybody, whether you're working in the public sector or you're in the private sector or in the banking industry.
Fantastic, thank you. And we are actually out of time, but I would like to allow just a few closing comments from Jan.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just see a massive opportunity for the work that needs to be done. And I think the imperative in a place like South Africa is one, not just called decarbonization, and that needs to happen, but kind of growing economies, keeping the lights on. I think there's a very clear link between the availability of power and electricity generation and economic growth. And if we really want to see economic growth across the continent and in South Africa, we really need to kind of turn the dial and make sure that we get electricity to businesses and to people.
Access is absolutely key. Absolutely agree. Famira, do you have any last comments that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so absolutely agree. I think the opportunity for South Africa is clear, but we do have a limited window of opportunity. So I think it's important for us as a country to work together and to work at speed, right? Otherwise, we may lose the opportunities that are currently available. So that would be my final comment.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this fascinating panel, and thank you to Judith for joining us virtually. And I think with that, I can hand back over to our lovely host. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Penny, and thanks to your panelists as well. That was really a great and enriching discussion as well. The panel, ladies and gentlemen, really illustrating the opportunities and the fact that they far outweigh the risks. And I'm by no means downplaying the risks here, because the risks are significant, right? But there are several opportunities to scale renewables, facilitate sustainable financial investments, and then partner to create a positive change in the communities we serve. So we need to start, investing to adapt and not to transition. And important to highlight on this note here is that these are not only opportunities, but necessities as well, as we strive to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals in Africa. At this point, to our CNBC Africa viewers, it's been a pleasure hosting you and having you join in on the conversations this morning. We're going to be saying goodbye to you right now.